prepare my safety on what I have.
Really?
Over to you.
Right, my presentation is on house music and the Roland TR-909 and 808, and also the 303 bass synth, but not as much as those. But, during the 1980s, disco was finally seen as a dead genre, because no one was interested in the same sounds that had been around for 10 years. Like just the constant and the fashion and everything, just the whole disco raver scene were just dead. So people were looking for a new style to repair the music industry after 10 years of 60% of chart music being disco rather than anything else, even in America. So yeah, basically people started inventing these new genres and hating disco, which gave new genres a chance, and like smaller labels could then equal out against major labels, because major labels were dominating the scene at that time. So yeah, it was full of domination by disco. So yeah, people were experimenting, and sort of people wanted to sample disco tracks and make a more thumpy bass sound out of what was already there, just by sampling, but no one could achieve like the sound they were thinking of just because of compression and all the effects on disco tracks. Like it couldn't possibly work how they wanted it to. So yeah, people were sampling drums anyway. So I've sampled some drum thingies and sort of tried to make it how it would be. Oh shit, opened it iTunes.
A space to do this.
Sick. So just like sampling of sort of hats and what are called stems. At that time, and then if we get rid of this shit, what was that? So yeah, so the first true sound of house music appeared with the release of the Roland TB-303 bass synthesizer. Many people reckon this was sort of the first sign of house, because before this point there were no sounds like this. They were just really, sort of, you could tell what they were really sort of arpeggiated and weird. But at first, when people started releasing these songs, everyone thought it were the amateur producers genre, just because everyone rinsed the presets and it was just, every sound sounded the exact same. So yeah, and I found a VST plugin that gives you the exact sound, like the 303 sounds. So over the drums I've just shown you, put a bass on top of it. That is horrid because it's a 303 bass, but yeah. It's just really arpeggiated, sort of horrid mess. So I changed it between different ones. It's just sort of that sort of, not techno, but under-structured bass sound, and everyone was just going for that for some reason. But yeah, anyway, moving stuff going on. Alright, so yeah, anyway. Yeah, anyway, it was for those reasons it was called an amateur producers thingy, just because it sounded horrible. But yeah, anyway, shortly after the release of the TB303 bass synthesizer, the Roland released the TB808 drum machine, and then really shortly after the 909 machine. And these were purely synthesized sounds, and it's like that's what people were looking for because it was futuristic and it had never been heard. And before this time, and at the same time, all the industry standard makers of drum machines were sampling and trying to make things sound acoustic, and this kicked it all off because it was futuristic. And yeah, Roland just took it in the other direction compared to what everyone else were doing. So yeah, looking more in depth at the 909 and 808 by Roland, the kicks are recognised for the sort of boomy timbre, low tone, and it's sort of like in the mix the bass is really, it like fills the low end and it's got a nice cut off and it doesn't interrupt with any of the high frequencies. So yeah, and it's the basic structure of it is a sine wave through an ADSR filter. So yeah, that's the kick drums. The snares were sort of, they looked like cloudy, like they hovered above the mix and then it left all the low end open for everything else. And that were again just a sine wave. So yeah, I've got an example of the actual machine doing its thing. Yeah, this is like just a guy messing with it. Plenty of different things you can do with the machine anyway, yeah. Pretty cool. So yeah, that was the 909 in action. Right then, DJ Ron Hardy was one of the first people to start mixing the genre of music, sort of the new house, sort of Eurofunk, everything all in one. And everyone seemed to think that his mixes were really emotional, but at the same time everyone wanted to move to it. And this was later found out the owner of the club where he had residency at, he basically paid guys to spike all the drinks with acid and LSD. Like previous to the night, so that's probably why it was so good. Everyone loved it. So yeah, people fell in love with house and acid and LSD, and many people feel that the best thing about house is the kick and the snare, just because it's so wide in the mix, like dynamic wise. So yeah, that's sort of what house is. So there's a lot of arguments over who is the founder of house, but the percussive sounds from the Roland are most widely known as sort of the sound founders, like just because all the sounds are uncompressed and everything, and the sound banks are really good. And yeah, there's this guy called, what's his name, Frankie Knuckles. He's like referred to as the founder of house by many people. There's lots of documentaries about house on the internet and his name always pops up. He's just like, he runs it basically. It's pretty sick. And I've got one of his tunes just to show you what he does. You might have heard it, you might not have, but it's a laugh. Same 303 bass underneath that. think it's dull, but yeah. So yeah, right. I have a slide. Yeah, so anyway, from this point it just kept evolving and it got more and more sort of commercialised. It were in Chicago and other places, just all over the world. And yeah, I've got a slide missing, so I'm just going to say what was on my slide. Basically, snares weren't, after this point, snares were not only taken from the Roland, but also the Simmons SDS5 and the Roland CR, just because of the pure percussive sounds that they've got on the devices. The TR909 went on to succeed in many other genres, and people still use it today with different genres. It's often used with the Akai MPC or the EMU SP 1200 thingy. Yeah. Also, the 909 gets its sound from its 12-bit sample rate, and it's sort of a hard tempo structure. Like if you turn it up, the tempo will jump up, but there's sort of mistakes, so it almost sounds live. So it sort of blags people to think it's live when it's not. And yeah, basically. Yeah. I had an example of some modern house, but close to it.